welcome to Thursday's episode of the Literary Lutheran Reads the Book of Concord. This is episode 99. Today we will actually finish Articles 7 and 8, the Church. The adversaries say that universal traditions should be observed because they were supposedly handed down by the apostles. What religious men they are. They wish that the ceremonies received from the apostles be kept, yet they do not wish the apostles' doctrine to be kept. They should judge these rites just as the apostles themselves judged them in their writings. For the apostles did not want us to believe that we are justified through such ceremonies, or that such ceremonies are necessary for righteousness before God. The apostles did not want to put such a burden upon consciences. They did not want to place righteousness and sin in the observance of days, food, and the like. Yes, Paul calls such opinions teachings of demons, 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. Therefore, the apostles' will and advice should be taken from their writings. It is not enough to mention their example. The apostles observed certain days not because this observance was necessary for justification, but in order that the people might know at what time they should gather. They observed also certain other ceremonies and orders of lessons whenever they gathered. The people kept the customs of the fathers from their Jewish festivals and ceremonies. As is commonly the case, the apostles adapted to the history of the gospel certain things, although somewhat changed. Among these things were the Passover and Pentecost. The apostles did this so that not only by teaching, but also through these examples they might hand down to posterity the memory of the most important subjects. But if these things were handed down as necessary for justification, why afterward did the bishops change many things in these very matters? If they were matters of divine right, it was not lawful to change them by human authority. Before the Synod of Nicaea, some observed Easter at one time and others observed it at another time. Neither did this lack of uniformity harm faith. Afterward, the plan was adopted by which our Passover, Easter, did not fall at the same time as that of the Jewish Passover. The apostles had commanded the churches to observe the Passover with the brethren who had been converted from Judaism. Therefore, after the Synod of Nicaea, certain nations held firmly to the custom of observing the Jewish time. The apostles, by this decree, did not wish to put a demand upon the churches, as the words of the decree testify. For it asks no one to be troubled, even though his brothers and sisters in observing Easter do not change the time correctly. The words of the decree are found in Epiphanius. Do not calculate, but celebrate it whenever your brethren of the circumcision do. Celebrate it at the same time with them, and even though they may have erred, let not this be a care to you. Epiphanius writes that these are the words presented in a decree about Easter. The wise reader can easily conclude from the decree that the apostles wished to free the people from the foolish opinion of a fixed time to help them from being troubled, if a mistake should be made in setting the date. However, some in the East who followed the teaching of the audience argued because of this decree of the apostles, the Passover should be observed with the Jews. In refuting them, Epiphanius praises the decree and says that it contains nothing that departs from the faith or rule of the church. He blames the audience because they do not correctly understand the expression. Epiphanius interprets it in the sense in which we interpret it, because the apostles thought it unimportant what time the Passover should be observed. Nevertheless, for harmony's sake, and because prominent brothers and sisters have been converted from the Jews who observed their custom, the adversaries wish the rest to follow their example. They wisely warn the reader neither to remove the freedom of the gospel nor to burden consciences. The apostles thought that consciences should not be troubled, even though there should be an error in setting the date. Many things like this can be collected from the historical accounts. In them it appears that a lack of uniformity in human observances does not harm the unity of faith. What need is there of discussion? The adversaries do not at all understand what the righteousness of faith is, what Christ's kingdom is. That is clear when they judge at uniformity of observances in food, days, clothing, and the like, which do not have God's command as necessary. Look at these religious men, our adversaries. They require uniform human observances for the unity of the church. They do this even though they themselves have changed Christ's ordinance in the use of the supper, which certainly was a universal ordinance before. If universal ordinances are so necessary, why do they themselves change the ordinance of Christ's supper, which is not human but divine? We will have to speak about this entire controversy a little later. Article 8 has been approved entirely, in which we confess that hypocrites and wicked persons have been mixed in with the church and that the sacraments are powerful even though given by wicked ministers. Ministers act in Christ's place and do not represent their own persons. According to Luke, the one who hears you hears me, chapter 10, verse 16. Ungodly teachers are to be deserted because they no longer act in Christ's place, but are antichrists. Christ says, "Beware of false prophets," Matthew chapter 7, verse 15. Paul says, "If anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received, let him be accursed," Galatians chapter 1, verse 9. Furthermore, Christ has warned us concerning the church in his parables. When offended by the private sins of priests or people, we should not stir up divisions as the Donatists have wickedly done. However, concerning those who have stirred up division because they deny that priests are permitted to hold possessions and property, we hold that they are completely rebellious. To hold property is a civil ordinance. It is lawful, however, for Christians to use civil ordinances just as they use the air, the light, food, and drink. For as this order of the world and fixed movements of the heavenly bodies are truly God's ordinances and are preserved by God, so lawful governments are truly God's ordinances, preserved and defended by God against the devil. This has been the Literary Lutheran Reads the Book of Concord, and I wish you a blessed day.